Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's Video Podcast. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I've been doing something a little bit different almost every day now. And this period here through July and August, I'm going to try some new things. So what I was going to do today, I was going to do a little bit of autobiography. And what I've gotten back of me is a little time chart. Well, let's get the bigger picture. Can you see the bigger picture? Yeah. I put up a copy of the New Yorker magazine, which has that classic picture of New York City and the rest of the country being a flyover. And then it's got a timeline up here, starting with 1944 when I'm born, and ending with, well, I put this together when Trump was president. I need to fill in Biden's name over there. He'd be the president now. So these are the people that were all the presidents during my lifetime. And originally I put this together to talk about some of the historical significance of what was happening way back then and how it's affecting what's going on today. But I took down the political references, threw up the New Yorker, and I'm just going to talk about my life for a while and see how that goes. I pretty much I was born and raised in New York City and without a doubt had an extremely colorful childhood. My father owned a bar in Manhattan. He had worked in it for a number of years, and then he eventually bought the bar when I was about 10 years old. My parents were, to say the least, unique, colorful. My sister and I are 7 years apart. We spent about 12 years in the same room together living, and if we talk about our childhood, you would think we had completely different parents. I will talk about my childhood later on, but you would literally think we came from completely different families. And I've noticed that with other families too. Two people in the same situation, and it's just everything is different for you than it is for the other person. My childhood was colorful and interesting, and along the way I went to Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school, and by the time I left high school, I was completely disillusioned with religion. Somewhere around the third year in high school, I guess after becoming sophomoric, by junior year, when you started to think about things, and you started to look at some of the doctrine within the church, there was absolutely no sense to this whole Virgin Mary or the beginnings of the earth and the beginnings of the Bible and the contradictions between, a loving God 1 minute who's stoning people to death the next minute. I mean, contradictions everywhere. So by the time junior year was about, senior year, I was drifting away. And as I was drifting away, the voices from the East were starting to permeate the culture. And Thomas Merton, who was considered the father of the church back in the 60s and 50s, went on a world tour and was maybe assassinated, according to some people. So I started to become disillusioned with the church by the time I was already leaving high school. The next disillusionment was with the service. So I was in the Air Force. I was in the Air Force for 2 years. And during that time, I found out that it was pretty corrupt, and the biggest thing I learned there was you could do it if you could get away with it. If you could get away with it, it was okay to do. If they didn't catch you doing it, it was okay. If they caught you doing it, it wasn't okay. So the general feeling was you could do whatever you wanted as long as you didn't get caught, so you tried not to get caught. And this I found from people above me, not people below me. So when I left the service after a couple of years, I was pretty disillusioned about the service also. My next major institution was the corporation where my mother had always wanted me to get a good job. So I went from an airline to a bank to AT&T. And after 10 years with AT&T, I wrote a 17-page letter of resignation accusing them of lying, cheating, and stealing on a corporate level. I was one of the only people to quit AT&T and collect unemployment. I proved that their policies were literally making me sick. Well, after I left AT&T, we were in California by now, and I had started to get into health food. And it's an interesting story about how I actually invented this or created a brown rice and tofu sandwich, which I used to support myself with for a couple of years while I designed, planned, and built Wildwood Natural Foods, which turned out to be the only successful cauldron-style tofu shop in America. Well, to do it, I needed partners. I needed partners with some money, and I took on the partners, and it was a disastrous partnership. Much like a recreation of my father's partnership. A little different, but similar in that it had a disastrous effect. So at the end of the day, I wound up leaving AT&T after I got them up and running and they were successful. And I signed a 5-year covenant not to compete. The other 3 partners, tried to insist that that covenant went on forever. It didn't. So after 5 years, I went back into business again, reinvented the sandwiches, reinvented another business, and wound up not doing well at the end of the day. I was basically put out of business by Whole Foods. I was delivering fresh foods, and Whole Foods basically was a deli with a grocery store around it. And the whole starting of Whole Foods is another interesting story. In the middle of these two, there's a tail end story from AT&T where there's this major system failure in New York City in the mid-'80s. And I've been out of there for a while, but my best friend still worked there. So I was intimately involved with some of the happenings that were going on at AT&T. And in this period, there was a power failure which caused the 3 airports, and the stock exchange to shut down. And that had to do with deregulation. Deregulation is what that had to do with. So that was another little interesting aspect story. So I'd been working on the other business, and in late 90s, organic sugar was introduced, and I got the idea to invent an organic Twinkie. So I quit my job managing a health food store, and I set out to invent an organic Twinkie. Well, needless to say, it didn't happen overnight, and it was a long, drawn-out time, and it wound up being 18 years, $50,000, and 5,000 hours. I invented it with the help of a young man from Germany, but we never got it to market. We ran out of money before the end of the day. So these were sort of the main aspects of these stories, and at the end of the day, it was like 3 years ago, after 9/11, I had done a TV show for a year. Right before 9/11, 6 months prior, things just started to come out of me. When Timothy McVeigh had blown up the federal building in Oklahoma, and he didn't go to court for that, get convicted until 2001, the spring before 9/11. So it was right around that time, the spring before 9/11, when Timothy McVeigh was in the news every day, and he was, they were going to bring him to court, and they were going to execute him. And when that whole thing started, suddenly things started to pour out of me. And I literally could feel 9/11 coming. And I'll talk about that at another time, too. So a few months after 9/11, I did a little TV show on community access. Not like this, though. I was the talent, and somebody else was actually doing all the technical work. They had the cameras, they had the editing equipment. It was much easier that way, having somebody else do all this. So we did a show for almost a year. We did a show for a year. We did 50 shows, poetry, politics, and tea. I would read a little poem. I would then take a one-way phone call from, like Bob Newhart used to do, I would take a call from, the Pope or George Bush or Dick Cheney or somebody in the administration, that type of thing. And then I would deconstruct the news, and the second half of the show I would interview a woman working on world peace. I would find her every week. I would stand in my health food store, and I would ask, is there a woman working on world peace? And every week, for 50 weeks, somebody would be there to respond, and I would interview them that week. So this we did for, like I said, a year. And then after the year, that stopped. And then I went back to the Twinkie project, finished inventing it, but didn't get it to market. Laid fallow for about a year or so until Trump came in, And as Trump came in, I knew I had to get back and start to do something like this again. It's just a disgusting disgrace what's gone on with this guy. And day in and day out, it gets worse. So anyway, that's basically the kind of thing I wanted to do. I was going to use this as my timeline. And we're going to talk about things that happened when I was younger, in the middle years, and towards the end. And the main things were how I was raised in this colorful family, the bar being taken over by the cops and the mob, my disillusionment with religion in high school, my disillusionment with the Air Force while I'm in the service, and my disillusionment with the corporation while I'm at AT&T. And then after that, we've got the invention of the brown rice tofu sandwich, and later on the invention of the organic Twinkie, and in between a couple of shows, a little poetry. One of the things in terms of an autobiography about me is astrologically I'm a Gemini. So if you're into astrology at all, I have six planets in Gemini. 6 planets in Gemini. So a typical cartoon picture of me would show a picture of, in fact, I saw this picture once, I never saw it again. It had a picture of a guy sitting on top of sort of a mountain peak. And there's 2 sides to him. And one side, he's sitting in a lotus posture meditating. And on the other side, there's a hooker with a pipe in his mouth, and he's smoking some weed. So there's this picture of the Gemini, spiritual on one side, doped out on the other side. That's one astrological definition. Geminis and myself, especially with 6 planets, are known for talking a lot, and that's why I'm doing the show here. At one point when I was a kid, I wouldn't shut up, and they put me in a corner, tied me into a chair in a corner, and I kept talking in the chair in the corner. So that was one thing, the Gemini part. But also there's a thing called human design. And I will talk about human design a little bit more extensively, but briefly, it was a system that incorporates astrology, astronomy, the I Ching, and the Kabbalah. And this was a transmission that went through a particular individual quite a while ago, over 10 years ago now. And I went into a friend of mine's house one day, and he looked at me and said, you know, you shouldn't have been working. I'll bet you're a projector. And he was right. I am what they call a projector. So within this system of human design, there are 4 categories. There's manifestors, there's generators, there's projectors, and there's reflectors. And within the first 2, there's manifest generators. So there's actually 5 groups. And I'm what's known as a projector, and I believe there's less than 30% of the people are projectors. We're idea people. We get a lot of ideas, but we can't make them happen unless somebody else comes in and asks us to do something about it. Now, I didn't know this about myself when I went and did Wildwood Natural Foods. I had come up with the plans for Wildwood. They were in my back pocket. I was making the sandwiches. I had a business going, and somebody came to me and said, oh, I've got this money. Let's go into business. Well, that's exactly what a projector needs. He needs somebody to come and see what he's doing, pop down the money, and then you get it done. With the Twinkie project, it was the opposite. It was my idea, me moving forward. Nobody ever said to me, hey, let's do this. In fact, the only thing people ever said to me was, why would anybody even do this? Why would anybody want to invent an organic Twinkie? After knowing what my human design was, I then understood what was going on. So for me, the Twinkie project was like Sisyphus pushing a rock up a hill. Whereas the brown rice tofu sandwich, somebody came along and it happened. And with the TV show also, somebody came along and they said, I run these ads locally for these local businesses. I'd like to have a talent talking about something like news or something. And he knew me, so he knew the kind of things I was into. So he's asking me if I will be the talent on the show so he can run his ads for his local businesses. Once again, somebody comes to me, asks me to do something, then it happens. So the few times things have been successful for me have been when I've had something ruminating, and somebody has seen that in me, and they've come to me, and then it made it happen. So this is a little bit about human design and myself as a projector and a Gemini. And that's it. That's, I think, what we'll talk about for the day. Let's end it right there. We did 15 minutes, which is probably more than enough time. And peace, patience, persistence, and we'll see you next time.